your personal development will be what makes the difference. So that's a thing I think we overlook a lot, is like the healthiest you is the most impactful you, and that person can actually run the distance. I work with a lot of leaders who maybe just were taught at a young age that the harder they worked and the more they performed and the more success they had, they would be loved then. That's definitely not God's word to us. God doesn't say that to us, but I think we take that. And so a lot of the people who I know who are most successful and unhappy are the ones who are performing and succeeding because they think it will result in relationships and love that they want.
Welcome to the Faithustle podcast, where we help young Christian entrepreneurs learn how to build their business God's way. I am so excited for today's conversation. I have someone that is just such a brilliant thought leader, just a brilliant thinker. He is a licensed therapist, but he's also an incredible business owner. He has multiple practices, and he has helped so many high-profile ministry leaders and business executives and entrepreneurs in their mental, emotional health. And he's going to share some wisdom with us today, not just of how he grew his company, but how he is helping people to undo certain traumas and things that they've experienced that's causing them to be stuck. And so I really hope today will bless you. And if you enjoy any of this conversation, we do this every single week. We bring on guests, people who have built businesses that are crushing in the marketplace, that have done it God's way. And so if that interests you, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, wherever you may find your podcast. We're on this journey together, and I'm excited for it. And so without further ado, I want to introduce to you Jason VanRuler.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh my goodness, I have as well. And I mean, we've had this on the calendar for a few months now, and
yeah,
I was trying to figure out how to get up there to South Dakota, but just couldn't figure out a way. But man, I'm so grateful to be with you and to get into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a good one.
I believe it. I believe it. And so, first of all, too, I have to shout out Jamal Miller. That's how we met.
Yeah.
We met. I think you were doing some type of kind of coaching day with him, and I was just there filming video, and then we just kind of connected. And I'm just grateful of obviously your love for Faithustle, but grateful for what you're doing in the marketplace and for ministry leaders, helping them get healthy. And it's really important work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel called to it, and so it's an honor every day to get to do it.
Come on. I love it. I love it. Well, I want to jump right into it. I don't want to waste any time. I'd love for you to take me back to the beginning of how your therapy practice started. Like what led you to get into this?
Yeah, I mean, so I tell people the story. I was an 8-year-old boy journaling about what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so that doesn't tell you who I'm supposed to be already, right? But I literally, in my journal, I wrote down, I want to be a psychologist. I want to have, an office in a brownstone. I want to write a book. I basically mapped out this whole life. And then what happened is life happened. And so all the things I was kind of counting on at that point changed. My parents got divorced, and life kind of got upended. And so things just went a different direction. And so I found myself in my young 20s. I had been a recruiter and recruited a lot in the tech space, started a recruiting company. And shortly after getting married and running the recruiting company, I went to my sweet wife and I said, hey, I've just been feeling this tug on my heart and this call from God. And she's like, oh, okay, well, what is that about? And I'm like, well, I think I want to be a therapist. I think that's just something I've always wanted to do, mostly because I've always dressed like a therapist and overthought things. So I'm like, this is perfect job for me. And I remember her being so sweet and just saying like, oh, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, about 8 years of school. And she's like, great. Will we make the same money we're making today? And I'm like, oh, probably not, and she just loved me so much. And so kidding aside, I had known my whole life I wanted to do this. I think it was about nailing the timing But once I got married and kind of had the opportunity to go back to school, that's what I did.
Gotcha. Wow. So, yeah, I don't think I've ever met someone that like from a young age they wanted to get into therapy or whatnot, or it's like I feel like maybe when you become a teenager or something, but I guess never really at an early age. And I think it's beautiful that you made a pivot in your 20s. Um, I find that's harder to do of like just a straight pivot, but like clearly like God was pulling you into purpose. And I mean, listen, that's a message in of itself of, I mean, I feel the same for me. I was doing, a certain trade. I was doing video production. And I think I just realized like, man, I want to make an impact somehow. And just felt this burden for it.
Mm.
And it was, I had to take a hard right. I obviously we can see now that it's paid off, but for anyone that's feeling that, like, man, I don't know, I feel like I'm in the wrong thing. Like, what would be your advice or wisdom to them?
Yeah, maybe you are, so maybe you are in the wrong place. I think for me, what it looked like is just one step at a time. What I wanted to do is I wanted to look to the end, and I
Mm,
wanted to just sort of say, hey, it's all about the outcome, and I'm not going to be happy until then. But I think with the amount of school I needed to do, so when I went back, I hadn't even completed my bachelor's, so it was like there's going to be a long road ahead of me. And what I tried to do is just enjoy every moment along the way.
mm,
And so what I tell people is if you think you're in the wrong chair, try the next one over. Just try
mm.
the next one over, because otherwise I think what we do is we make it so big and we make the stakes so high that it's really hard to take a step
Yeah.
because it feels like everything's on the line. And so for me, what that looked like is to just simply start calling around to some colleges saying, what would it look like for me to try to do this?
And so yeah, it was just you trying it on. Like you just taking that step. And I think that's brilliant. I think the worst thing in the world, I think, is I think Miles Monroe talked about this, that the place with the most wealth is the graveyard,
Mm,
because it's filled of dreams and things, people's potentials that were never lived out. And I would agree. And like you said, sometimes it's just like the unwillingness, or a lot of times just fear of just taking that next step, or just exploring what could be. And you never know, like you never know, you could be walking into purpose. And I mean, I never wanted to do podcasting. Like I was just
mm,
like, man, I'm not cut out for it. And the first day that I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, like I was born for this. But like I wouldn't have known, unless I tried it on.
right.
And I think that's brilliant. And so you get into it. So kind of fast tracking here.
Yeah.
You go to school, become a licensed therapist, and I guess talk to me of how it seems like you have expertise with those who are kind of high capacity leaders. I'm sure you work with a lot of other different individuals, but high capacity leaders, business leaders, people in ministry. I guess tell me how that kind of began, of like kind of that niche. Like I guess talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know that it was any sort of strategy from the get go, right? I mean, I think like a lot of things, I just sort of fell into it. So, got licensed, started a practice at that time, was doing a lot of work with the federal government. And so we started a multi state practice. I had a business partner. And so we launched several locations. That was great. But that season kind of came to an end. And so I successfully exited that company and then just started working on my own. Now, along the way, as I was doing all of this and doing therapy, I was running other businesses that I had started in the background. So we do a lot with real estate and things like that. And so I think for me, I tended to attract the type of clients that I would be spending time with, the people that I would look up to, that I would hang out with. And so it naturally just became a thing where I understood business. And so I worked with a lot of business leaders and it grew from there.
Gotcha. So you kind of spoke the language. It was just it made sense. You were able to relate to them in that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think that's not always so common in the therapy world.
No, it's very true. It's very true. I mean, in a lot of, and it's funny. Like one of the things I was thinking of, because the fact that you had grown a practice in multiple different states, I find a lot of times people who are in any type of clinical work or something like that, you can be very proficient, excellent in what you studied, but like translating that into business is sometimes really hard. Of like, okay, how do you grow this business? And so somewhere along the line, you learn how to grow the business and like what informed you or helped you to do that?
Lots of failure. I just failed an awful lot.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would say is I've always been a student of business. I've always been interested. I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of podcasts. I just find a lot of value in it. And so doing that, I often found myself wondering, why don't therapists do this? Why is that off limits over here?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the best of ideas are at the intersection of two different things, right? And so business and therapy, what is at that intersection? And then I would add business, therapy, and faith. What is right there? And so what I tried to do is just zero in on that spot and say, what would it look like to grow something that made an even bigger impact for the kingdom?
What I love about that is that your curiosity of like not just staying in your circle or your lane, but like you said, kind of going to the other side, or just being willing to learn, being willing to grow, and like realizing that it can mix. I feel like there's a lot of people that can feel restricted in what they do. It's like, well, everyone in my field does it like this, or everyone in my path does it like this. And I love that you just kind of left yourself open to be like, no, I'm gonna stretch myself. And I think that's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant just posture to have. It's to
Well,
like,
I didn't know it at the time. I mean, thank you. At the time, I just was a guy with an idea. But I mean, what always stood out to me is just, I think sometimes, like you said, we're afraid to borrow from another industry. And our fear about doing that actually prevents us from doing something that needs to happen in the industry anyway. And so we just sort of look around at everybody else and say, what's everybody else doing? And we try to just refine that instead of saying, like, what's working somewhere else that we could bring here.
That's so good. I mean, I think that's where like true innovation starts. You got to get outside yourself, get outside your bubble, to see something else. And I mean, I think that's, I think God calls us to that, right? Like, where, I mean, I think of all the times that God called, Moses up the mountain, or, there's different leaders in scripture where he'll take them on a journey almost like away. Moses had to spend time with, to live in the palace before he could, lead the people, the exodus out of Egypt. I feel like there's moments where God kind of separates you so that you can almost see from another perspective. Because, like with, I guess, Moses' story, like they're like, why are you thinking this way? Like this, it's always been this way. But like God allowed him to see what others didn't see because he was able to experience something different. And I think that's just a brilliant principle to that we can live by. I
would just say, I think our tendency is to look around, and I think God says, look up. And so it's sort of like we're in this big circle of our colleagues or, the people around us, and we're just looking at them. And God's like, hey, you got to look at a different place, right? And so when we do that, I think there's so much wisdom to be gained because we're not trying to just do the worldly stuff, right? We're saying, how do I actually build something that lasts? And I think that changes the nature of our business.
Friend, really quick, before we keep going, if you're enjoying the conversation we're having in this episode, you're going to love what we have inside the Faithustle Network. What's the Faithustle Network? I'm glad you asked. It's more than a podcast. It is a growing community of faith-driven entrepreneurs looking to do business God's way. We do weekly Bible studies, Friday strategy calls, and network with each other in our chats. You even get access to the people that you see on this show to ask your questions in real time and hear their wisdom and strategy that could help your business. Whether you're just getting started or you're scaling something big, this is where faith and business meet. If that describes you, tap the link in the description and get in the room today. Now enjoy the rest of the episode.
We're called to do business God's way. That's the whole point of this podcast. But part of that is like you have to think different. You have to, you know, there's a different path that God has us on. I mean, I think of like Daniel. It's like, hey, like, yeah, I know the other Hebrew bros are doing this, but like we're gonna do it a different way. And I think being willing to explore a different way, I think that's where change happens. I think that's where impact happens. I think that's amazing. What I really want to get into in our remaining time here is because I think this is going to be so valuable for people. Again, you've helped a lot of high capacity leaders. I mean, honestly, for myself, I want to know what are some common things you see as pitfalls for leaders, business leaders that you're working with, that you're seeing that like, man, this is what they're struggling with when it comes to their mental or emotional well-being, their health, that you're just seeing across the board that maybe we could take a look at. Because, you know, we have people on this show that not all of them have businesses. Some of them are aspiring to, or some of them in their very early stages. And I kind of like this platform. It kind of allows them to kind of get some insight into it and maybe learn some things that they're going to do and maybe they're not going to do. And so I love for you to share, like, what are some things that you've seen across the board, patterns with leaders that you're like, yeah, these are some patterns that to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some pretty consistent threads or patterns that I see. And so I would say probably the top three. The first one would just be a belief that performance and success equals love and happiness. So I work with a lot of leaders who maybe just were taught at a young age, either directly or indirectly, that the harder they worked and the more they performed, the more success they had, they would be loved then. And so if you have that belief system that says, hey, I need to perform to get love, you'll probably always be successful by the world's standards. You know, so the good news is you're probably doing great in business. The bad news is that you're probably not happy doing it. And the reason is it's a broken rule about life, right? That's definitely not God's word to us. God doesn't say that to us, but I think we take that. And so a lot of the people who I know who are most successful and unhappy are the ones who are performing and succeeding because they think it will result in relationships and love that they want.
Wow.
And what they miss is a lot of times the people who love the most are just waiting for them to slow down enough to spend time.
Wow.
Yeah. So I see that one a lot. The next one that I would see is people who don't have a lot of self-awareness. And I think the reason for that is if you want to do something big, or you want to start a business or have a big dream or big goal, you have to get pretty good at shutting off some feelings and what other people are thinking and saying about you, right? You have to get really focused and just move forward. And while that's catalytic at the beginning, that's a great thing at the beginning, if we don't learn how to sort of step outside of that sometimes, we aren't always so aware of how what we're doing is impacting others.
Yeah.
And so that makes a tremendous impact on the front end. But if you want sustainable leadership, you have to develop some self-awareness and some ability to listen to some people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So lastly, then number three is I run into a lot of people who are very, very talented. They're very kind. They've got amazing hearts. And so what they do is they just walk around over giving. And they spend all their days delivering amazing value to everyone around them, but they forget to take care of themselves. And so sometimes I'll see people who are just beloved, but at the same time, they're exhausted, they're depleted, and they haven't had anything to give for a long time. And so I would say those are kind of the three big ones that I see from leaders.
I tell you what, you hit the nail on the head. I definitely, I can say resonate with the third one for sure. But it's so, even the first one of what you hit on of, that's a fascinating thought. The thing that actually works in the marketplace, quote unquote, leads to your personal demise. I think that's such a, and, the Bible is like very clear where it talks, in the New Testament where it says, I wish above all things that you would prosper, be in health, even as your soul prospers. And I mean, as you're talking about this, I'm like, I don't know if we see the value of a soul prospering. Like, we definitely value, earthly prosperity or the material things or achievements, but soul prospering is like, is that on top of the list? And like, what we make sacrifices or make decisions based off of soul health? And typically not. Usually not a
Not
lot.
not that I've seen. I mean, there's not a lot of magazines that, have a spread highlighting someone's soul. That's usually, hey, that's a great idea. That'd be pretty cool, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen it, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, imagine if we started with those sort of questions, and instead of the money you're making, the things you're doing, it's just like, how are you really, and how is your soul? And I think that is less popular maybe today, but it isn't less important. It's actually most important.
Yeah. And I guess I would love to, even as a follow-up ask of this, of when these things aren't addressed, when you don't realize, man, I'm actually performing or working for love and approval. I'm not self-aware, or I'm giving and I'm giving and I'm not being replenished. Like I'm giving from an empty tank. What's the common things that leads to? Like, if that goes unchecked, it doesn't get worked on. How does that impact that leader and the people around them that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it usually culminates in crisis. So that could be addiction, that could be exhaustion, that could be just a lot of things that haven't been tended to and have been avoided that fall apart. But there comes this point where, it's the point of no return. Like, all of this stuff comes to a head, because even the most capable person has a limit. And so maybe they get away with this for, a year or 5 years or 10 years, but at some point that person kind of falls apart. And there are different ways they do that. And, some maybe are bigger and newsworthy than others. But at the end of the day, it's the thing that I started out trying to do, I've now lost control of, and I'm broken.
Mm. And and I know for people who are high performing, that's frustrating when you feel like you have an answer for everything else, but you don't have an answer for this.
Mhm.
And I was actually, funny enough, I was thinking about it, of like, when, you know, I use the term high capacity leader. I feel like that's just like a common like phrase,
Yeah.
but it almost in of itself, it kind of gives it away of like, uh, you don't have unlimited capacity. You may have a high one, but you
Right.
will run out at some point. Like, at some point, uh, you are not unlimited. There, like, you're gonna hit a wall if you don't take a moment to address certain things. I mean, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I talk to, Christian or non-Christian, right,
Mm.
who are succeeding, that um, they know that they are going down a path, like the habits that they're doing is not healthy, but because maybe right now it's working, it's like, well, I'm not going to change it because
Right.
I don't want to change this outcome. Or I've gotten to this point so far. It's almost like if I notice there's a kink in my armor, like that would just mess with their worldview or perspective.
That's when it becomes about us, though. The funny thing is, when we start to talk like that, I think that's probably not God's word.
Yeah,
That's our word.
yeah,
And so we kind of get to that place. And so what I see a lot of people do is they're sprinters instead of long distance runners. And
mm,
so they just sort of sprint through life, right? They run as hard and as fast as they can, and then they sort of limp and fall over, and then they get a little energy and they sprint again, and they do the same thing. But the problem is, if you've ever tried to do that, eventually you can't run very far, right? You're just exhausted completely.
yeah.
And so I see what I often call a lot of sprinters in my practice that need to learn
Mm.
how to run distances.
Man, that's brilliant. I Okay, so going off of that, How what are practical things that you help them to learn how to be the marathon runner instead of the sprinter? Like using that same analogy of like,
Yeah.
because I can relate to that where there's times where I feel like my life feels like a sprint to sprint.
Yeah.
And I know I dealt with that a lot early on, where I was just like going full steam ahead with all the ambition and passion to build something, right? And really, what I ended up learning is like I'm just trying to prove something, trying to prove to my family, myself, that I'm capable or that I'm able or this or that. And it was extremely unhealthy, and it led to panic attacks and anxiety and all these different things and unhealthy habits that, by the grace of God, God's helped me in that to break. But I guess I love to hear from you. What is for someone that is running at a high capacity, building business, whatever they may be doing, because I can hear someone saying like, "Are you telling me to slow down?" Like, like what I mean. There's that thought of like,
I don't want to slow down.
right?
Yeah.
How can I slow down? But obviously, we're hearing the like, if you don't address this, what happens?
Hmm.
But I guess what's the practical ways that you're helping people like, hey, here's what running at a marathon speed looks like rather than a sprint pace.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think just the first thing, even before you start to run, is know why you're running. And
Ooh.
where is God in that? So sometimes I work with people and they're just running for running's sake, and because it's what they've always done. And so while I understand that if we're just running for running's sake and we don't really have a purpose or we're not called to it, we're probably never going to get to where we're supposed to go. So I think the first thing is, why are you running in the first place? I think the second thing is, getting to be in my role is amazing because I get to learn from so many really accomplished people. And so what I will tell you about anybody I've ever met that has done a really good job over time is they've had some non-negotiables in their life. So
Mm.
even in seasons of sprint, there have always been a few things they've held on to that they do to help them run at an optimal rate that are just non-negotiable. It's just going to happen either way. So what I try to help people do is figure out what are those things for them. What do they need? What are their priorities that they need to maintain and nurture, even if they're sprinting, so they can continue to sprint?
That's beautiful. Okay, so we got to learn why we're running. Like,
Hmm.
don't just running for running's sake.
Hmm.
And then we need to figure out our non-negotiables.
Hmm.
What are some? And I guess everyone's non-negotiables are different. What's some healthy non-negotiables that you've seen that you're like, hey, you need to have this?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a faith person, being in the word every day,
Yeah.
probably no one ever complains that hurt them. Right.
Yeah.
I think few people go, well, I was trying to be successful and I was in the word every day and it really messed everything up. Okay. That's probably not happening.
Yeah.
Then I think also just the relationships in your life. I think for me, it's, my marriage and my kids, my family, that I need to make time for them, because if I don't, and I achieve a big goal, but I don't have them, I didn't really achieve anything. And then we
Mm.
start to look at, what do you need personally? So is that working out? Is it journaling? Is it time with friends? Like, how do we build a really efficient life so you can run? But in order to do that, you have to be really dialed in on who you are, what you want, and what you need. And one of the primary things that I find with leaders is they settle for what they want and they never get what they need. And so identifying and getting
Mm.
what you need is really important.
They settle for what they want,
Hmm.
but they don't identify what they need.
Hmm.
That man, that's a bar, and I think it's a tragedy, and I've seen it, and I've seen it with the most well-intended people too, where they mean well, but they're fed this way of doing business in life. And maybe it's passed down to them from family or from whoever their business mentor is. That's why I think it's so important who you have in your ear. That's literally why we started this podcast. I think Dr. Darius Daniel says, "Whoever has your ear has your future,"
It's true.
and I've seen people go down a just dangerous path of striving. That's like, I mean, literally, like I have friends like it. I mean, they've almost died because they started getting health problems because what was happening on this internal world, this soul world, ended up coming to the external. Like this has implications if you don't deal with it. And all the while their spouse and their family is like, why are you running so hard? Like what but there's this thing in them, it's like that just won't quit. It's funny. I just finished watching on Netflix. It's called I think Owning Manhattan, and you know, respect for their real estate agency. Not trying to shade them, but the guy who has this company, he, I mean, he's running at full speed, and he's got a wife and a daughter, and his wife several times is like, "Aren't you happy? Like, do you really need to scale to like billions? Do you really need to like why can't you just enjoy yourself? You're in a room. Why can't you?" And it was fascinating because I was like, yeah, this is people's everyday where they feel like there's this thing that they have to just keep racing after. And like you said, like what? Why are you running? Like where are you going so fast that you need to be in a hurry?
Yeah, and are the people who you say you love the most in support of that?
Mm.
I remember some of my biggest business successes. I've come home and talked to my wife, and she hasn't been that excited about them. One of the first times I said, "Hey, I'm doing this. I've been working, 60, 70 hours a week." And I share with her this win, and she's like, "I just liked it when you came home for lunch." To
Wow.
her, it was never about the thing. And so I think sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, what is this really about? And is this really honoring what I say is important? And then what I talk to clients about is there's how it looks and how it is. And some of
Mm.
us are brilliant at how it looks. We're really, really good at that. We are not great at how it is. And so, Scott Peck has this quote where he says, mental health is commitment to reality at all costs. And so
Ooh.
sometimes we have to get real. And getting real means how it is, not just how it looks.
Commit to the reality at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
Because
man.
it's easy to lose along the way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you can kind of hide that behind some wonderful achievements, but it's still there. And myself as well as you, I'm sure we work with people sometimes where how it looks and how it is are two very different things.
Absolutely. Especially in this age of I feel like an old person in this age of social media, but like it's real. It's like you can hide
You can hide.
really well. I've
Hmm.
met so many influencers who are just miserable,
Hmm.
and you would never know. Some of the loneliest people I have met have the most followers.
Yep.
And yeah, and it's an interesting thing, but like they've orchestrated their life in such a way where they cannot show any problems or challenges because it's going to ruin their brand. Uh, and so it's almost like because that's their job, they can't turn it off, and so that ends up following them home. It follows them in every other place. They don't have, and I mean, I think that's why I'm such a huge advocate. I mean, other than it was Jesus' idea, but advocate for the local church because it's like, what other place do you have that you can just kind of let your hair down, right? Obviously, going to a licensed therapist, going to a counselor, um, but even just starting with, hey, get in a church and have some people that actually know you, like for real, and that they love you. But like I'm grateful. I have people in my life they love me, but they're not overly impressed to not tell me the truth.
Yep.
Like I had a really good hard conversation with it wasn't even a hard conversation. It was just it was an insightful conversation with one of my mentors, and he was like, "Hey, here's some just things I'm seeing. I don't know if you see this, but this is what I'm seeing." And I was like, "Man, I did not see that. Thank you." And you know, the moment that we stop and we don't realize that we're all of us are susceptible to not just the attacks of the enemy, but our own flesh and our own cravings and desires. And we got this thing in us, like at our one of our events I talked about is like this ambition that's in us. It's like a animal, a beast that you have to feed that's never satisfied. You
Mhm.
can feed it as much as you want, and it will never be full. And I just think these are such practical things to help us. And I hope it's encouraging and inspiring people like, hey, like get a new lens, get a new uh I guess example to follow that's not just like if the person you're following after, don't just look at what they've acquired or the stuff they have. Like look at their wife, look at their spouse, look at their like is everything they have what you want? Because if it's not, you're going to get everything they have, even the stuff you don't want.
Right. Because it's a blueprint, and so I think that blueprint is not well understood, or if our blueprint comes from deep wounds or childhood hurts, what we end up doing if we're not careful is we kind of build our own prison cell. And sometimes we get it, right? And then we go in and we go, hey, this stinks, and we constructed it. And so what I try to help leaders with is just, what are we building? Why are we building it? Who's in favor of that? And then where is God in all of this? And if we don't know where God is in all of this, then we should probably take a pause and figure that part out. And so, what I would say is just like, I love getting to work with the people I work with because they have a heart for helping others. And I would just tell them, your personal development will be what makes the difference. So that's a thing I think we overlook a lot, is like the healthiest you is the most impactful you. And that person can actually run the distance.
The healthiest you is the most impactful you. And I think we have to reframe our minds to see that as a valuable investment of time and resources. Like, I've been through counseling, years of counseling. It cost me money, a lot of money, but it's the best investment I could have ever made, because I think of my future spouse and children one day that they're going to thank me. They might not even know how to thank me, but they're going to thank me for that. They're getting a better version of me. I mean, same thing with, the people I lead. Like, I think of, man, if I didn't allow the Lord to heal me of a lot of different things. I mean, years ago when I was like, just starting out, I was a very insecure leader, very much so. And if you lead from an unhealed place, it will bleed on others, and like,
True.
and it bled on other people. And thank God for His grace. I think what I'm trying to get at, and I'm so grateful you're here to share this, it's worth the investment to do the soul care. It's biblical, it's right. And I feel like there's a lot of people. I mean, we always use Solomon as like the ultimate example of like, oh, like, yeah, like wisdom and wealth and this and that. He warned us in Ecclesiastes, like, guys, like this insatiable desire for more, it runs out eventually. Like yes, we love the Proverbs, and I love the Proverbs. I feel like we don't read enough of the Ecclesiastes of just like, hey, the warning. Like,
yeah, there was a warning or two in there.
Yeah, exactly. Vanity, like,
Yeah.
hey, like, some of these things that we're striving for is not worth it in the end. As we close here today, and I'm just so grateful for your time, and just we got to have you back, and we got to do it in person next time.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I'll come with to South Dakota. Why not? Maybe not in winter, but
maybe not in winter.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
Exactly. I'd love, again, for those who are just either getting started in business, who are listening, or are in their year 1 to 5 range. We've talked about some of the common pitfalls, some of the things solutions you recommend. If you had anything of like, listen, like, it is imperative. Like, if you implement this now, you will skip steps where you may not have to have the crisis that leads you to humility to like be in your office. What are things that you would say, hey, you need to implement this now, not later, to help you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's know who you are, know why you're doing it, and then know what you need, right? A lot of people, when they first start, they talk about what they want. I want you to know what you need. And then it's just sort of like, in bowling, and I'm not a really big bowler, but I always think of it this way. If you don't really know how to bowl, they have bumpers, right? And so they put bumpers, and those bumpers make sure that when you throw the ball, it gets to the destination. Now there's a little bit of variation, right? So I mean, you don't always get a strike, but it at least makes sure you're headed the right direction. I think for someone who's new or starting a business, you need some bumpers. And those bumpers are probably people, it's your faith, it's meeting needs, it's those things that say like, hey, I'm never going to go too far off this path. Because I think what I see sometimes is people want to win so badly, they're willing to sacrifice things they don't understand the value of to get a thing they want, but they never needed.
Wow.
And so when we do that, sometimes we get what we want, but we're alone when we get it.
Man, I mean, that right there, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. And what a tragedy that would be. You get what you wanted and you miss what you need.
Yeah. Because if you're the only one standing at the celebration or the ceremony holding the cake, that's not success.
No. I think I think John Maxwell, he was the one that said like that true success is people the closest to you think the highest of you.
Yeah.
And we just had a men's event in my church, and Pastor Jeff Little, he spoke, and he has this like famous saying. He says, what a tragedy it is to put points on the scoreboard. You spend your whole life putting points on the scoreboard, but you realize you're playing the wrong game.
Yeah.
And I want us to play the right game. Like, again, all these things you're saying, we got to realize, hey, why are we playing the game? Why am I running? Why am I going the distance? Have your non-negotiables. And then, like you said,
and who am I lifting up along the way? That's the other thing is if we do leadership and business right, eventually we hand off the baton to someone else. And what a lot of people do is they wait until they're exhausted to find someone to hand it to, instead of handing it to the person they've been helping along the way. And so that's also something we need to think about is just what is my plan for the future, knowing at some point there's going to be a handoff.
Wow. And that handoff is I wish we had more time to talk into that. That handoff I've seen a lot of leaders trip on, where they either hand it off too late or they handed it off and what they're handing is like basically broken because they're doing this. I've seen it in ministry all the time.
Yeah, there is an art to doing it, and the secret behind it is it starts way before you think it should. Yeah, we have to be strategizing for that way before you think you ought to.
Yeah. And if you're a runner by nature, you don't want to stop running. And like you have to learn how to transition that. And I think that's brilliant. Man, we are out of time. I wish we had so much more time to dive in. This has been so powerful. Grateful for. I know you have a book, right? That it helps people go past their trauma. I definitely want to make sure that link is in our description so people can purchase that and obviously follow you on Instagram. Anything else that you would, how can they get in contact with you or kind of take a next step with what you're doing?
Yeah, my website's jasonvr.com. And yes, I've got a book called Get Past Your Past and a new one about communication that's rooted in attachment and all kinds of good things to help us connect better on a communication level. So that'll be out in April. So lots of fun things going on.
That's exciting. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, if you have a pre-order link, send it to me. I love to put it in here.
I will definitely do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, brother, for your time. And like I said, well, I have to take a flight up to South Dakota and to see you to do this in person again.
Oh, I would absolutely love it. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of the Faith Hustle podcast. We hope you felt challenged, encouraged, and equipped to walk out your faith hustle. And if you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening on YouTube or any audio platform. As well, leave us a review. It helps us so much in our ratings so we can get the word out to more people. Each week we have these conversations with business owners who build their business God's way. And so we look forward to growing with you on your faith hustle journey. We'll see you next time.